The mystery of the disappearing chicks. The Peter family had always cherished their peaceful life on a small farm nestled on the edge of Greenfield Village. The wide-open fields, clear skies, and cozy barn were perfect for siblings Emma and Jake, who spent their days exploring the outdoors and caring for the animals on the farm. However, what they loved the most were the adorable baby chicks, who were the latest addition to their flock. The siblings were excited to watch them grow and took turns feeding and caring for them daily. But one sunny morning, as Emma and Jake rushed to the chicken coop with fresh grains, they made a shocking discovery. 3 of their precious chicks had gone missing. "Where are they?" Emma gasped, scanning the empty space inside the chicken coop. She leaned closer to count the remaining chicks, but couldn't spot the missing ones anywhere. Jake scratched his head, squinting his eyes to see if they had somehow escaped. "This is so strange. The door is locked and the coop is closed. How could they just vanish?" The siblings checked every corner of the coop and even searched around the barn and the fields nearby. But no sign of the 3 chicks. Their parents had gone to town, leaving Emma and Jake to care for the animals that day. "We better tell Grandpa," Jake said with a concerned look. Their grandparents lived in the farmhouse right next to theirs, and their wise Grandpa Peter had an answer to almost every problem on the farm. The siblings hurried to the farmhouse and found their grandpa sitting on the porch, polishing an old pocket watch. "Grandpa," Emma exclaimed, breathless. "3 of our chicks are gone. They just disappeared from the coop." Grandpa Peter looked up, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. He put the pocket watch aside and motioned for the children to sit. "Gone, you say?" His voice was calm but firm. Strange indeed. No sign of them anywhere." "No, Grandpa. We searched all over," Jake added. Grandpa rubbed his chin. "Well, there could be more to this than meets the eye. Animals don't just vanish on their own. We might be dealing with a mystery here." He paused, his eyes twinkling slightly. "But don't you worry. We'll get to the bottom of it." Over the next few days, the situation only grew more puzzling. Each morning, Emma and Jake would head to the coop, only to find more chicks missing. In total, 6 chicks had now vanished. "Someone must be taking them," Jake whispered to Emma as they walked back from the coop. "But who would do that?" Emma shook her head. "It can't be foxes or raccoons. Grandpa would have noticed tracks, and we keep the coop locked." As they pondered over the possibilities, they noticed something odd. Their neighbor, Mr. Fletcher, a tall, thin man who lived a few houses down, had suddenly taken a keen interest in their farm. Normally, Mr. Fletcher kept to himself, but recently, he had started showing up near the chicken coop and acting unusually friendly. "Morning, kids." Mr. Fletcher waved from across the field one day as Emma and Jake were feeding the animals. "Morning, Mr. Fletcher," Jake replied hesitantly, sharing a curious glance with his sister. "Fine day to be out on the farm," Mr. Fletcher said with a wide grin, his eyes darting toward the chicken coop. "How are the chicks doing?" Emma and Jake exchanged puzzled looks. Mr. Fletcher had never shown any interest in their chickens before, but now he was asking about them almost every time they saw him. Something didn't feel right. That evening, after discussing the strange behavior with their grandpa, he gave them an idea. "Sometimes, people disguise their intentions," Grandpa Peter said, deep in thought. "If you think someone might be sneaking around, you'll have to be clever to catch them. Keep your eyes open for anything unusual." Emma and Jake decided to be extra vigilant around the farm. They checked the coop multiple times during the day, and Jake even convinced their family dog, Max, to stand guard near the chicken area. But nothing seemed out of place. One afternoon, while returning from the barn, the siblings spotted something peculiar. Mr. Fletcher was standing by his garden, a strange contraption in his hands, a small cage with a tiny creature inside it. "What's he doing?" Emma whispered as they crouched behind a bush to observe him. The two watched as Mr. Fletcher placed the cage near his garden shed and walked back toward his house. When they got closer, they were stunned to see what was inside the cage. "Is that one of our chicks?" Jake whispered, his voice full of disbelief. The chick inside the cage looked different from their others. It had patches of feathers dyed in strange colors. But upon closer inspection, Emma recognized the chick's unique markings. "It's ours," Emma exclaimed quietly. "He's been disguising them. He must have stolen them and dyed their feathers so no one would notice." The siblings quickly ran back to tell Grandpa what they had found. When they explained what they had seen, Grandpa Peter's face grew serious. "I had a feeling something was off with Mr. Fletcher," Grandpa said. "But now we've got proof. It's time to confront him together." The next day, Grandpa Peter came up with a plan to catch Mr. Fletcher red-handed. The siblings would need to create a diversion and lure Mr. Fletcher to the chicken coop, where they would confront him with evidence of his crime. Jake, being quick on his feet, suggested they set up a camera to record Mr. Fletcher's actions. Grandpa agreed, and they placed a small camera near the coop that would capture anyone approaching the area. Meanwhile, Emma would keep an eye on the dyed chicks in Mr. Fletcher's yard, while Grandpa pretended to go into town for supplies, giving Mr. Fletcher the perfect opportunity to strike again. As the plan was set in motion, the children waited anxiously. Hours passed, and just as dusk was settling over the farm, Mr. Fletcher made his move. He approached the chicken coop, looking around to ensure no one was watching. But Jake and Emma, along with their hidden camera, were ready. The siblings watched from the barn as Mr. Fletcher carefully unlocked the coop and reached inside to grab another chick. This time, there would be no escape for him. Jake stepped out of the shadows, holding up the camera. "Caught you, Mr. Fletcher," he shouted, his voice ringing through the quiet evening air. Mr. Fletcher froze in place, his hands still gripping the chick. His face turned pale as he realized he had been caught in the act. "You've been stealing our chicks," Emma cried, stepping out beside her brother. "And we have proof." For a moment, Mr. Fletcher looked like he might run, but Grandpa Peter's voice stopped him in his tracks. "Not so fast, Fletcher," Grandpa said, stepping into the scene with his arms crossed. "You're not going anywhere." Mr. Fletcher's eyes darted from side to side, but there was no escape. He knew he had been caught. I can explain," Mr. Fletcher stammered, trying to find the right words. "It's just, I needed them for my garden. The chicks, they help keep pests away. I didn't mean to steal them, I swear. I thought if I dyed them, no one would notice." Grandpa shook his head, his expression stern. "You've not only stolen from us, but you've deceived these children. You'll need to make this right." Later that evening, Mr. Fletcher stood in the Peters' living room, his head hung low in shame. Emma and Jake watched as Grandpa Peter laid out his punishment. "You'll return every single chick you took," Grandpa began, his voice firm. "And you'll clean out the chicken coop for the next 2 weeks. Maybe that will teach you a lesson about stealing from your neighbors." Mr. Fletcher nodded silently, knowing he had no other choice. As the days passed, Mr. Fletcher stuck to his word. He returned each chick, carefully removing the dye from their feathers. And true to Grandpa's punishment, he cleaned the coop every morning under the watchful eyes of Emma and Jake, who had become the farm's honorary detectives. One morning, after finishing his cleaning duty, Mr. Fletcher approached the siblings with a sheepish smile. "I just wanted to say sorry," he said. "I should never have done what I did." Emma and Jake exchanged a glance before Jake spoke. "We appreciate the apology. But remember, you can't just take things that don't belong to you. Next time you need help with your garden, maybe you can ask us instead," Emma added. Mr. Fletcher nodded gratefully. "I'll remember that." With their missing chicks safely returned, life on the farm returned to normal. Emma and Jake continued to care for the chickens and spent their days playing in the fields. But now, they had a new story to tell, one of mystery, deception, and justice on the farm. Grandpa Peter smiled proudly as he watched the siblings from his porch. "You two did well," he said one afternoon. "You solved the mystery and stood up for what was right. That's more important than anything else." Jake grinned. "I think we learned a lot from you, Grandpa."